Present.
Deputy Mayor Jack Barry.
Present.
Councilmember Lee Fellows.
Lee?
Present.
He's here. Councilmember.
Here.
Councilmember Mark Cross.
Present.
Councilmember Kathleen Huckabee. Councilmember,
Oh, she's gonna be late.
Councilmember Michelle Petiti. Here. Councilmember Nancy Whitten. Here. East Lake City Liaison.
Here.
Thank you. Substitute City Attorney Carrie Sam, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is public comment, and this is an opportunity for the public to address the council. 3-minute limit per person, or 5 minutes if representing an official position. Please state your name and address when you come to the podium. And we have 2 people signed up. Deb, which would be the Chamber of Commerce.
Hello, my name is Deb Sogi with the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce, and I wanted to update the council on some events coming up. And the first one will be the second season of the Sammamish Farmers Market. We're going to have some of the same vendors as we had last year, the favorites, but in addition, we're going to have a lot more entertainment for kids, more crafters than we had last year, more bakers, more farmers, more everything. So please send everyone to the farmers market. It's going to be a great year. And I wanted to extend an invitation to you, honored mayor, and the city council, and the city manager, and the staff, to please come to the opening celebration on May 20th. It will be, you'll be getting a special invitation in the mail, but it will be an opening day where Eastlake will come with their drummers, and it's going to be quite something. So please come on May 20th. It'll be held every Wednesday from 4 to 8 through September 30th. And I also want to take this time to thank you, council and city, for all your help in putting this together, because we couldn't do it without you. The other thing that's coming up is August 29th. We have the birthday celebration that the city is going to put on, a big celebration with the Parks and Recs Department during the day for families. And at night, when the sun comes down, we're going to have an adult venue on the plaza out here. It's called Sammamish Nights, put on by the Sammamish Chamber. There'll be music with Darren Matamati. There'll be wine and gourmet food. So please, mark your calendars. And that's about it. But I wanted to thank you and for the privilege of announcing this to everybody. And please pick up your brochures. They're out at the City Hall and all around the businesses about the farmers market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb. And I think the 10th birthday celebration is going to have, hopefully we're going to have some video opportunities so people can come and be interviewed, and then we'll put the video in the time capsule to be open in 40 years. So we're working on that project. Next on the list is Mike Collins.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name's Mike Collins. My address is 2841 East Lake Sammamish Parkway Northeast. I just wanted to report back and let you guys know that there was a very successful roundtable discussion last night. There were 93 residents here plus staff. They were here well past the closing time, and it was very productive. I also wanted to check in and make sure that the Council Open will be happening tomorrow, and if by any chance you happen to know who will be participating for
Well,
Council.
the mayor will be there and possibly the deputy mayor. Anybody else going to be there? Nope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anybody else that would like to address the council? Mr. Galvin.
Last week, John Galvin, 432 228th Avenue Southeast. Last week you had a presentation about the first quarter economy, city financial condition. One thing we learned with the banking collapse was that for several years people were saying that deregulation and all of the fraud associated with these loans, etc., was a big problem, but nobody listened. So I think it's very healthy for a city like ours to have a real, honest, open debate about the economy. And I hope that as the election season comes forward, that we really engage in a healthy debate, not just a lot of patting one's own back. The city, I think, is heading into some very, very difficult times, and we're digging a hole. And I think it's going to be very important that we stop digging and really start to ask ourselves some difficult questions. Oops, there we go. Nothing's happening here. There we go. For 10 years, the city has really not expanded the economy. And I think we're moving now into a stagnation, and it's starting to contract. As the hole gets deeper, we have to move away from being a bedroom community. We don't have a post office. I just tried to mail something, and they wouldn't take it down at the post there. I have to go outside to Redmond or some Issaquah. We have no teen center, no senior center, no retail office space, no town center. We lack all of these things. And if we look at our TIP, the Transportation Improvement Project list, it's huge, over $100 million of things that need to be done. Just looking at the projected operating revenues and expenses and this crossover in 2015, you'll notice that between 2009 and 2012, we're really postponing that crossover part by cutting expenses. And I think if you look at the economy, we've been cutting and cutting and cutting and postponing projects, key projects, for years. 244th is an example. 2002 started the plan. It's now 2009, and it's not moving forward. And I doubt that it will move forward this year. But I think that crossover, if you look at the lines are so close, we do not have any more money to transfer from our general fund into capital improvement projects. Not enough to sustain what we need to do. Through together this, if we look at the revenues just for transportation fund and the transfers in, you'll see a pattern, right? When it comes to 2010, it's way down. And only half of that is used for actual new road construction. The rest is for a variety of other maintenance-related projects. So if you look at this, there's a real drastic change coming. If we look at what's happened, we've postponed this crisis by not carrying out projects. And if you look at, we've been allowing all our money to build up in our transportation fund. But just this year, I'll end with this, we have planned a $28 million expenditure on 244th and on East Lake Sammamish Parkway. That's going to, you can't even see it now on the graph. Our transportation fund is going to go down. So we're really facing a difficult time. So I appreciate that you need to have a positive, like our present government. We have to say things that are much better than they are so people don't get discouraged. But we need to have the courage to really face the situation. So hopefully the economy will be top of the list for public debate during the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin, and I'm sure it will be. Anybody else that would like to address the council? Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. If there's no objection, the agenda is approved. Student liaison report. I did. Student liaison reports. Natalie?
Okay. So we had ASB election speeches today. Next, we are hosting a movie night featuring a movie called Anchorman. Some of you have heard of it. And it starts Friday at 7 o'clock p.m. And our East Lake Drama Team is hosting a spring play called You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And that starts next Thursday through Saturday from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock p.m. And last weekend, our Invisible Children's Club sponsored a charity event called Displace Me at East Lake. And it was an overnight event starting Friday at 8 o'clock p.m. to Saturday morning, 8 o'clock a.m. And the purpose of it was to spread the awareness of the living conditions of the children in Uganda. So people could only sleep on cardboard or on the floor, so they brought blankets and pillows, and they could only eat bread and water, or in other words, fasting. It was a very successful event. We have a lot of participants, and some activities that kept people entertained during the event included like an overnight volleyball tournament. People created a patchwork mural, and some participants brought in school supplies that we collected to send to the kids in Uganda. Yeah, that's about it.
Good. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on this beautiful day.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, next is presentations and proclamations, and Dawn Sanders, where's Dawn? Dawn, will you introduce Alexandra Beatty and the Eastlake Student Art Project?
I would be happy to. Allie Beatty is a senior at Eastlake High School. She's going to present a special project tonight that she completed this year called My Shots. Allie is hoping to attend McGill University in Montreal this fall. Economics finance, is that what it is, with a minor in French. As Allie was telling Melanie and I about her project, I just assumed this is probably her senior project at Eastlake High School, but it's not. This is just something that she's done out of her passion and working with the students that she's working with at Eastlake. So Allie, come on up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Allie Beatty, and for the past 2 years, I've had the pleasure of working with Miss Futch as a peer tutor at Eastlake. At school, we focus on typical work such as math, reading, and spelling, but I thought it'd be fun to give the students an opportunity to do something more creative that would introduce a new way of self-expression through the art of photography. I gave each student a disposable camera and had them take photos of the things that were most important to them. The board here is a collection of those photos. When I printed these pictures, I could tell who shot what right away. Every photo reflected the student and their interests. This made it incredibly hard to choose the pictures, but I hope I did the students justice. I'd like to thank Ms. Futch and Eastlake for the opportunity to do this project, and the City of Sammamish for providing a place to display the finished work. Most importantly, I'd like to thank the students who participated in the My Shots project. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and working with you for the past 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, Allie, if you could stay there. And are some of the students here?
Say again?
Are some of the students here tonight?
Yeah, we have
Okay.
3 students here. So, all right. So Dylan, Caitlin, and Emily, if you guys could come up.
Okay, we have some certificates of accomplishment for the students.
So there's Caitlin,
Yep.
Emily. So Emily.
Okay, Emily Hammond? Okay, there you go. Congratulations. Okay, Caitlin? Caitlin Bush? Yeah. Okay, and Dylan? Here we are, Dylan Zeitlin. Congratulations, come on over here and we'll get a picture of you.
Yeah.
And we have some flowers for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you.
I hope you all get a chance to look at the board in the back. There's some great pictures there. Next is the consent agenda. Hearing no objection.
Oh, I have one.
Oh, you have one? Okay.
You're not giving us enough time to object. You have to ask and then wait.
Is there anybody that would like to change the consent agenda?
Well,
Yes?
I guess I'd like a status on the Pine Lake project. I don't care if it's in the consent agenda or not. I mean, I have no objection to the action. It's just as a point of information.
Well, let's pull it off the consent agenda and discuss
Well,
it.
they may want to discuss it at another time. We were out of town at a convention conference, so we
Mr.
didn't
City
have a
Manager?
chance to.
I'll be happy to have Parks Director to give you a report, but unfortunately, due to loss in the family member, she is not able to attend tonight's meeting. So this is a contractual, procedural item. So what I ask council to do this, accept the project, because the project is pretty much done. We close it in order to release the retainage. We need to accept the project. That's a legislative action. And at the earliest study session, we'll give you an update on the status of the project.
Great,
That-
that would be wonderful, especially on the beachfront. We've been having some
Right.
comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the other items on the consent agenda, there's a payroll for period April 15th and April 20th. Approval of claims for the period ending April 21st in the amount of $870,149. A resolution adopting an identity theft prevention program pursuant to the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act of 2003. And then there's the resolution, which is the final acceptance on the Pine Lake Park Dock project with Pacific Pile and Marine. And that's Resolution 2009-366. And the identity theft resolution was 2009-365. Then there is an amendment to the Northwest Environmental Contract for on-call engineering, increasing the amount to not to exceed $30,000. And approval of the minutes for the April 7th, 2009 regular meeting. Is there any objections to anything on the consent agenda? And if that's the case, the consent agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is the public hearing on the ordinance, the first reading amending Chapter 21A45, the development standards with regard to signs of the Sammamish Municipal Code. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request from the council. Our Community Development Director took this particular code amendment request to the Planning Commission, and now what he's ready to present us tonight, the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Cameron Grell?
Thank you very much, Ben, and I'm going to ask Evan Maximum, who actually brought this through, to walk you through just a couple of PowerPoint slides to orient you, and then you can open up your public hearing.
Great. Greetings, Evan.
Greetings, Mayor, council members. I'm Evan Maxim, Senior Planner with the City of Sammamish. I just have 2 PowerPoint slides to go through. They're very brief, but just to give you a quick overview, if I may. As the City Council is well aware, we are looking at a code amendment here. So this would be an amendment to our Sammamish Municipal Code to improve the visibility of real estate signs on properties in particular that aren't fronting on a public street, so aren't visible to pass-by traffic. We did take this proposed code amendment to the Planning Commission on April 2nd. Sense of the Planning Commission generally was to support the proposed code amendment with some additional provisions, in particular sunset clause, which has been written into the draft before you tonight, and some specific design requirements for the off-site real estate signs. These are the code amendment as drafted tonight, to call your attention, does have a horizon date of December 31st, 2010, at which point it would require another council action to keep this code amendment in effect. It allows off-site real estate signs in a yard arm fashion, if you're familiar with that term. It's the horizontal post hanging off a vertical with a little blade sign hanging beneath. Allows those signs at the nearest public street and vehicular entrance to the property. So in some cases, that may be a significant distance away from the property that's for sale. It's analogous to our off-site, arrow signs that point up the street to go look at the property with go look at the property that's for sale. When we have more than 3 signs proposed on a corner at a given intersection, the code does require that a frame be installed and the frame be designed to accommodate up to 6 signs that would be shared by the various realtors in the community. It is limited to 1 real estate sign per realtor or real estate office at a given intersection. With that, I think it's a pretty straightforward code amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions for staff? Ms. Whitten?
Yes, this is a temporary ordinance, as I understand it, designed to sunset in 2010. And it is in response to our request for something that would help homeowners, distressed homeowners who are selling in this particular market, to make their properties more visible. My concern is that this only applies to the ability to put signs on private property, so that if an owner by this street entrance to the main road won't permit it, then they're dead in the water, so to speak. Why wouldn't they, I guess, why didn't we consider putting it, letting them put it in the public right-of-way next to that intersection? And are there any implications from a legal standpoint, since this is a sign code, that we might have to make a broader ordinance if we permitted it to be done on public property? I mean, I know that's...
Council Witten, I'll attempt to answer both questions. Bear with me for one moment. Regarding the first one, why we didn't actually propose the amendment to allow it on public right-of-way. These signs are perhaps more solid than the current types of signs we allow in the public right-of-way in general. So in general, we allow temporary signage, the A-frame signs. So there was a traffic safety concern. Many of these intersections are located where you have a private road entering a public road. The one that comes to mind is, if you're familiar with the Tamarack project that's just to the north of the Louis Thompson Hill Road. Many of those properties are located on private roads. Having that public road has a very narrow shoulder. To try and place a sign of this kind of substantial size in that right-of-way shoulder, there was a concern on the part of staff that might be a safety hazard. Second item was honestly the sight distance triangles that we try and protect at each intersection. In general, as you can see in the code amendment itself, we limit the amount of material placed at an intersection that might block the ability of drivers to see oncoming traffic either to the left or to the right. Having said all that, I did run the proposed code amendment past the city attorney's office. I did not hear any concerns about needing to broaden this further. We could certainly revise the ordinance to accommodate public right-of-way.
No, my question was, I know sometimes if you permit certain entities to do things with signs in the public right-of-way, you've got to, from a constitutional viewpoint, there's a concern that you may have to extend it to others. I don't know if that's correct or not, and I was asking that question, if that was one of the reasons why, and if that would be a concern if we decided to permit it on public property, where the sight distance and, for example, where the sight distance and safety hazards weren't a concern.
I could certainly investigate that further and report back to you.
Could our Ms. City Attorney comment on it at all?
Actually, I'd need to look at it more too and do research on that particular issue. Obviously, this is for a commercial purpose, but locating it in the right-of-way, I'm not sure if that would require that any particular provision be included to make sure that it's broad enough to allow other types of signage in the right-of-way as well. But we can certainly research that and get back to you.
It's not commercial. It's really for a residential related sale.
But it's commercial activity in terms of it's to advertise the sale of a home, a real estate listing. But we can look at that and get back to you, certainly.
Okay.
The other concern I had was with the time limit, and was wondering if 2010 would be long enough to fulfill the purpose we have of making homes more visible during this economic downturn, or whether you had considered extending that for another year or so.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me first perhaps give you a little background where this particular code amendment stemmed from. If you remember about a couple of months ago that we had a couple real estate agents and a few homeowners came up here and made a public testimony. Their concern was that particularly a couple of them were living in the private roads way inside, very far distance from the public rights-of-way. So if anybody's driving by, wouldn't notice that there's actual home is being for sale. And the sign code would not allow people to locate off-site real estate signs. So based on that, and given the current economic conditions also such that it's already difficult to get the home sale in the market, it used to be that the homes didn't really have to even put the signs in Sammamish market that, as soon as they go on the market, you would get about 2, 3, 4 offers. Well, conditions have changed. Although we're seeing just recently some improvements in the housing market, it's still kind of stagnated. So that's the kind of little background. And the question of why is December 30th, 2010 is a deadline. Remember that a month ago we came back with the other code amendments, temporary code amendments to increase the permit timing frames, allowing people to extend their certain building permits. We put the deadline of the December 30, 2010. So we're trying to keep all these things inconsistent. And then if the such time comes that the council requires us to extend them, we can all take a look at them in a comprehensive way, rather than putting a different sunset dates would make it very difficult for us to track them down. I hope that answers the question.
Good point. Ms. Petiti.
My only comment is having one of those properties that's way down a private road and far away from any kind of public road would be, no matter when I was going to sell my home, or a similar person would want to be able to put a sign out on, the nearest kind of active road or whatever access. So I don't see why we would sunset, or why we wouldn't leave that kind of provision in there for properties that are
Let me maybe
on private
perhaps speak
roads.
to that one as well, because I was here, neither Evans or Cameron were here, back in the 2000, 2001 days, that we were getting lots of complaints from citizens in terms of the sign pollutions, particularly for the real estate signs. And so the thought process, Councilmember Petiti, with this thing again, is that let's see how this thing progress, what the concerns and comments are going to be. Council always have the legislative authority to extend the deadline from December 30, 2010 as we get closer to it.
Is this wrapped into the whole sign ordinance that involves the school sign too? And so we're going to be doing all of this together, or?
Those pieces are coming. As what we try to do is to bring you this piece early, since there seemed to be some urgency on the part of the council to get this through the system. That's why we only were able to get the quote-unquote sense of the Planning Commission. They didn't hold a public hearing. They just looked at this one evening and made their recommendations to you, and those are reflected in the proposed ordinance. We did tell them that you were going to hold your standard process, though, with your public hearing, which you'll open tonight, and then make your decision at your next meeting. So we'll cover our public involvement basis, but there was some urgency in why we brought this one forward. We are continuing to work with the Planning Commission on the electronic reader board sign issue. So that is in process right now. And then the broader sign code update related to Town Center will probably come to you third in line, and that'll probably be some months down the line before that gets to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any Councilmember Cross?
I just wanted to comment. I'm looking at paragraph E about off-site directional signs. If I understand this correctly, Evan, if there's more than 3, then we would make them assemble it into one on with up to 6. But with each of them being 16 square feet in size, you're really looking at 96 square feet, or really 8 foot by 8 foot of signage for 6 houses.
That's 3 square feet on off-site. Isn't it 3
Yeah.
square feet on the off-site?
Councilor Cross, the original code amendment that was included in your packet did not include the proposed text called out in an underlined fashion. Proposed code amendment would be for the 3 square foot sign. We do actually allow for off-site development signs, and I'll use the crossings at Pine Lake is allowed an off-site development sign, and that is a relatively large sign, typically 16 square feet.
Right.
The code amendment in front of you tonight, though, would allow only a 1 foot by 3 foot sign, so a 3 square foot sign.
Okay.
Off-site for individual lots.
And that's in paragraph?
That would be contained in paragraph 2G on page 2 of 3.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for answering my question.
Okay, Councilmember Whitten.
I had one other thing on subparagraph E of 3. Doesn't make sense. Oh, I see. It's 4E. I'm sorry. It says no two signs for one residential development shall be located closer than 500 feet from one another on the same street. If you want a sign going the opposite way, they might be within 500 feet of each other.
Councilor Witten, that's the current sign code for residential developments. The crossings at Pine Lake, for example, would be some 130 lots that are advertised. That's existing language. We could certainly open that up for amendment, but that's not proposed for amendment tonight.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry that it was supposed to be highlighted and underscored, and it didn't get done. So,
and I apologize for that.
I couldn't tell what was new and what was old.
We'll get that at the next reading.
I think the underlined copies were distributed here. They didn't make it into your packet, but you have a loose copy in front of you that shows the language that was proposed for change. So.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions for staff, we'll open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, is there anybody that signed up? Is there anybody in the audience? Yes, please come forward and state your name and address.
Yeah, Greg Allen, 530 254th Avenue Northeast, Sammamish. And of all things, it took signs to get me to come out after about 3 years of semi-retirement from activism. They're just kind of a little pet peeve of mine. I kind of make the analogy of signs are kind of like an allergy. You kind of get it, it grows, it kind of bugs you, but boy, does it feel good when they're gone. And we've had quite a few out in our area, out there at 244th and Northeast 8th, and it takes a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years to keep it cleared out until they finally decide not to keep putting up all these darn illegal signs. And your paragraph E is a current is a current regulation that is in violation all throughout this city. I passed probably half a dozen or more illegal signs just coming here, and there's probably upwards of 100 in the city that are out in right-of-ways illegally without building permits and the whole bit. Anyway, so when I saw this proposed amendment, I thought, oh my God, we're going to get even more of this garbage. Well, I did review it just now, and it's not that bad if it is indeed what you really intend it to be. I would suggest one difference in, I guess it's 4A 1B subparagraph I, where it says the individual residential unit. I suggest you change that to parcel, because you could have the parcel actually adjacent to the road, but the residential unit off of the road, and you're getting into a lot of ambiguous issues there with enforcing this code. That's pretty much it. It just wasn't as bad as I thought it might be. So appreciate if you do this, keep it tight, and please enforce the regulations you already got in the books. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Good to see you again. Now we have Julie Bogdan.
Hello, I'm Julie Bogdan. I live at 21014 Southeast 14th Place, and I believe I'm the one that got this whole ball rolling. Being the fact I do have a house on the market. It has been on the market for a year, and without a sign on 212th, no one knows I even exist. I live on an acre and a half of property. I back to Ebright Creek Park, and if you drive down 212th without a sign on 212th, no one would even know I live down there, which is great for privacy. It's wonderful. I love it. But trying to sell a home, no one but myself and my realtor, or if you're surfing the internet, know that house is even available. And when I bought it by a sign that was out on 212th. And I respect not having a bunch of signs and everything, and we would more than respect the one-arm sign. I'm not asking for anything else other than just visible so that people can see there really is a nice home down there for sale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any more comments from the public? If not, what we'll do is continue the public hearing to our next meeting, which is May 7th. May 5th?
May 5th.
Oops. May 5th.
You could have a meeting, nobody's coming, Mr. Mayor, on the 7th.
Okay, and since this is the first reading, there's no action. Is there any other council discussion at this point?
Oh.
Councilmember Whitten?
Yeah, I have a concern about both should it be permitted on the public right-of-way where they can't get consent from the adjacent owner, or there's some other problem with the adjacent owner, I mean, that they can't do it, should they be able to put it in the public right-of-way if they have the approval of the city and the city confirms that there's no good reason not to, I mean, for safety or site distancing.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that putting in as a backup the right-of-way as a backup if there's a problem with getting private right-of-way, or maybe it's a big ditch or something, that might not make it possible
Mm-hmm.
to have some alternatives, because if for some reason, for example, the lady that just talked, that she can't get her neighbor's permission, she still can have a sign out there.
Cameron, do you think we could draft up something like that for consideration on May 5th?
If that's the sense of the council, we'll draft some language. Probably be something where we would have the city engineer play some kind of role to certify that the situation was still safe.
Mm-hmm. Right. Is that the sense of the council? Nod your head.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I think on the sunset clause, Michelle, were you comfortable with having it at the same time to sunset, and then we're going to address all of those at that point?
Yeah, I would like to see an extended sign situation for people like her and myself. If it stays in the ordinance, but we can work with that when we work with the whole ordinance.
Right. We or whoever's on the council at that time.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll be here still.
Right. Okay, any other comments? Nope. Okay, that's the first reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, there's no unfinished business, so we have new business, a resolution calling for the evaluation of emergency medical and fire service delivery within the city and setting forth city council policy and intent. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And I know we have a long agenda tonight. That is, we have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, and we have also the Arts Commission presentation on the clock, and then typical council reports, and then also the city manager's report. So I'm going to ask Mike to give a staff report on this thing. And Mike?
Well, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. At your last meeting, the City Council directed city staff to bring back a resolution for your consideration calling for the evaluation of emergency medical and fire service delivery within the city and setting forth City Council policy and intent. One of the city's highest and most paramount goals is to provide our citizens with the highest quality services available in a cost-effective and efficient manner. And we think that it is both reasonable and prudent for the city to review all city services on a regular basis to ensure that this goal is being met. Now, this is especially true of fire and emergency medical services. We have a contract with Eastside Fire and Rescue that is our city's biggest operating expense. In 2009, it was $5.3 million. We have a long-standing policy in this city of a tradition of conservative and business-like fiscal management that dictates that we really scrutinize these large expenses. That's the reason that we have a AAA bond rating. That's the reason that we have clean audits year after year. That's the reason that we receive awards for the quality of the budgets we produce, is because of the scrutiny that we pay to all fiscal services. So the resolution we bring forward this evening directs the city council members serving on the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board and the city manager to evaluate the emergency medical and fire service delivery within the city and continue to work towards achieving efficient, equitable, and cost-effective delivery of services. To that end, we're asking for three things. First, we're asking that Eastside Fire and Rescue explore an efficient and equitable funding model. The current funding model is based largely on assessed valuation. Sammamish has the highest assessed valuation of any of the partners in Eastside Fire and Rescue, which arguably could create some inequities in the funding. Second, we're asking that Eastside Fire and Rescue establish guaranteed caps on its annual increases. Now, predictability of future costs is in many ways more important than the costs that we're currently paying. And third, we're asking that we evaluate whether adoption of a different emergency medical and fire services delivery model would benefit the residents and taxpayers of the city and the areas served by Eastside Fire and Rescue. One of the things the city has never shied away from is looking at all available options so that we ensure that we are providing our citizens with the most efficient and cost-effective services available. Now, finally, let me make something very clear. The city of Sammamish receives excellent fire and emergency medical services from Eastside Fire and Rescue. I can make that statement based on our annual customer service surveys, based on the response times to emergencies by Eastside Fire and Rescue, based on Eastside Fire and Rescue's participation in community events. The list goes on and on. What we are saying with this resolution is that fire and emergency medical services need to receive the same level of fiscal scrutiny that we apply to all other city programs. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mike? No questions at this point? No? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is there any public comment on this resolution? No public comment? Okay. Do I hear a motion to adopt Resolution 2009-367, which is a resolution calling for the evaluation of emergency medical and fire service delivery within the city and setting forth city council policy and intent?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Council discussion?
I'd just like to know what steps are next.
Well, I need to do some more planning internally, so I'll get back to the council on that one. I don't have that right now in front of
Okay.
me, so I will get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to comment that we have received, and we do receive, annual reports from EF&R. We do have fees that we pay as a city for that, and I would hope that we could make part of our website and get those linked onto our website so that people can see the same kind of cost information that we can see.
Good suggestion. Sure. Anything else? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Resolution 2009-367, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote of 6-0, resolution is adopted. Okay, next on the agenda is council reports. We'll start with Councilmember Petiti.
Well, I just was reading the King Conservation report, and I thought I would just bring this to everyone's attention. They have a free sampling service that we contribute to King Conservation District out of public funds, and you can have 5 free samples done of your pasture, your yards, or your vegetable gardens. And on their website, you can it tells you how to do the sampling and where to drop it off, and they'll give you a report and tell you how you need to enrich your garden, pasture, yard to bring it up to a balanced level. So I thought that was really an interesting service, and wanted to let more people know about it.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. Councilmember Felling.
Okay, I'll talk briefly about something that's really been interesting over the last 2 days that Mayor Gerand, Councilmember Witten, and Councilmember Huckabee and I attended down in Portland. The National League of Cities had a Green Cities Conference, and there are representatives from city governments around the United States. And of course, it was very fortunate that it was so close in Portland that we could drive down there and get the benefit of this discussion. There was a huge amount of very stimulating and interesting material. I'm sure Cameron is wondering what great things we're going to bring back to add to his plate. But seriously, it was really fascinating, and there were some excellent presentations. There were national experts on a lot of these issues, and it was the range of discussion of not only what things look like they make sense, but also questions that are still trying to be assessed and be asked. One of the things that I was really struck by, having an interest in financial strength, is the confluence that I found between ideas that really make sense from a sustainability point of view and a green environmental point of view, and ideas that are cost effective. And one of the ones, something else too, that I got a chuckle out of, and my fellow council members who know my interest in railroads will appreciate this, but one of the presenters was saying that in St. Louis, in 1901, as they were putting in streets beside the trolley lines, they had budget limitations, and they really couldn't afford storm sewers. So what they did is they put in green streets, and they didn't need storm sewers, 1901. So sometimes you hear this stuff and you think, well, gee, this is the latest and greatest stuff that somebody just thought up a little while ago. In reality, it's been around a long time, and there's really a lot of good track record on this. The second thing that, and I suspect that some Nancy and Don may want to add some comments too. The other opportunity that we had being down in Portland was to see really a fabulous transportation network. Mayor Gerend took the opportunity to ride the line east. I really wanted to get a picture of him smiling on light rail. And I took the opportunity to ride west out to Hillsborough. And of course, there were two things that struck me. One is it's a fabulously interconnected network. Portland's going to become trolley and light rail city USA. There's a crisscross network that goes to the extremes east and west. And when I was going out west, where it goes out to Hillsborough, there's still a lot of open space out there. And one of the things that's just fabulous about it is you went along that line, there's all kinds of high-density development growing up beside the trolley line, the light rail line, so that people who live there never have to get in their car. Another thing that I was struck with is the number of bicycle commuters that would coming from the distance. They would bring their bike on, riding their bike from wherever their home was to the light rail station, putting their bike on the train. There's little hooks where you just quickly hook your bike on, and it sits with the front wheel up in the air, so it takes up relatively little space. And then they get off downtown or wherever they get off and jump on their bike and go on to their destination. So they never have to drive their car, and yet they can get around everywhere. The other thing too is just as an example of coming in from out of town on a business meeting. I, in my former life in private industry, used to do a lot of travel to different cities. And it was often very frustrating because you'd have your hotel in one place, your conference would be in a different place, and then you had problems getting from one to the other. My hotel happened to be downtown. It was one of the conference hotels. And I jumped on the light rail line and went across the river to the Oregon Convention Center, jumped off right in front of it. Took me 12 minutes to get there. And it was a delightful ride in the morning, beautiful weather down there, of course. And everything is connected. So it's really quite remarkable. And then the final thought, again, from the fiscal point of view, Portland was smart enough to do this early enough that a lot of it was paid and supported with federal money. And of course, federal money is all of our tax money. But where cities have been creative and really getting in early on the curve, they've been able to accomplish some fabulous things. And of course, the cost of doing this is only going to go up in the future. But they've got a spine in there that then the spine is connected to other communities by bus service, which is more flexible. But by having the rail in place, what it does is help you do long use land use planning. And so when developers see that this is there, then they can put in development that supports it, is along with it, and also cuts down on building new highways, cuts down on congestion of new highways, cuts down on carbon use, and a lot of other things that are really worthwhile. So it was really, from a lot of perspectives, a very stimulating experience. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Deputy Mayor Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Jaron. I don't have a report tonight, but I do have a question I'd like to ask our city manager, and it is this. For the last couple of weeks since we received our stimulus money, there has been a few people have come up to me and asked why we selected the project we did to use our stimulus money on. For example, today I was asked if I looked in the paper, University of Washington received a great deal of stimulus money to be used for research. Why, excuse me, why did we select East Lake Sammamish Parkway? And I'm led to believe, maybe inaccurately, but I'm led to believe that some people really don't understand that there was a process we had to go through. There were certain objectives and criteria that we had to meet, and timelines and those kinds of things. And when it got all said and done, the opportunity for stimulus money and the projects for which we could use were greatly narrowed. And as a result, it was rather a question of, do we want to use some money in a direction that perhaps in the future we would use our own tax money instead of this particular opportunity? That the stimulus money, the criteria how it be used was competitive. Other people wanted it. Other people frankly were a little bit upset that Sammamish received it. So we were, I think, fortunate to get it. And we did follow the procedures, and as a result, I think it would be helpful, Mr. Manager, if you would, when you give your report, just share with us the process we went through.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I appreciate for the opportunity to give you the report on this. Maybe I start with a quick background as to why and how we submitted our application for this project. If you remember, back in November, we were going through the public process on the East Lake Sammamish Parkway project, and some of the folks came to the public meetings and recommended, and as a matter of fact, asked for, saying that we should submit application for the federal stimulus funds, and that would lower the financial burden on the taxpayers by receiving some of those funds. Well, we did submit applications. We submitted the 4 projects. If I remember, the Public Works Director gave a detailed report, but let me try to refresh the council's memory. The 4 projects that we submitted were 244th Avenue, Southeast 24th Street Sidewalk, East Lake Sammamish Parkway, and then the overlay, citywide pavement overlay project. Out of those 4, the sidewalk project was not quite ready, so it didn't get into the rating criteria. The payment overlay project was pretty much in the King County evaluation process. A bunch of cities submitted payment overlay applications. There was no way of distinguishing the one from the other in terms of the rating criteria. They said, well, let's just keep that on the side. That's the preservation funds. That's not necessarily new construction. So the 2 projects competed were East Lake Sammamish Parkway and 244th Avenue. I believe the score for the 244th was about 80s, and the East Lake Sammamish Parkway received about the 90-plus points in the rating criteria out of 100. And there were 100-plus projects were submitted on the countywide. That's King County. And our projects was selected as the number 4 on the list. And that was actually the last project was funded, given the available funds, stimulus funds to be distributed in our county. The question is, can we use that fund to spend something else? Answer is absolutely positively no. That money is designated for that particular project. We cannot take that money and spend on something else. In terms of timing of this project, the one of the criteria for the selection process was that the projects are ready to go, and that's we looked at 4. Obviously, 2 or 3 out of the 4 applications that we submitted, they're ready to go. 244th East Lake Sammamish Parkway project, and as well as the payment overlay project. So that kind of gives you the background. I hope that answers your questions, and if there's more, I'll be happy to answer more.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I think one of the points to remember is these are just transportation funds, transportation stimulus funds. We have other projects that we're trying to get funds for. We also have the block grant funds from the Department of Energy. And the transportation funds had very rigid criteria, including having NEPA approved, which was the only, East Lake Sammamish Parkway was the only project that we had with that approval.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And as a matter of fact, we just recently received $135,000 from the Block Development Grant Program. That's for the sustainability purposes. We're working with about 7 other cities to submit a joint application to the federal government on getting perhaps more resources in our region in terms of making some significant progress on the sustainability. The projects are being considered like street lights. Instead of using the standard traditional street lights, maybe go with the LED lights that takes a lot less energy and actually it provides a better lighting. The other projects being considered is that the fleet update, instead of continue to upgrading our vehicle fleets with the traditional vehicles, is there a way that we can do it with the hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles? So we're working really hard to go after for additional funding sources, but that particular project, that particular fund was designated for that purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Councilmember Cross.
Two things I wanted to report on. One was the tabletop exercise for the Shoreline Master Plan that was held last night. You may hear more from Cameron at some point on this, but I just wanted to comment that it was well attended. People brought good questions. Staff was very patient with everybody, and I thought that the level of interest by people from all 3 lakes, and including a pretty interesting discussion on low-impact development standards, was all well received, and I thought that was a big success. The second thing I want to report on was the Growth Management Planning Committee, which is the PSRC subcommittee dealing with setting growth targets, but they also are responsible for reviewing and making recommendations to the full Puget Sound Regional Council on aligning the countywide or the King County-wide planning policies that guide growth across the county with the multi-county or the King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap County policies, which really above that in the pyramid is the Growth Management Act. One of the things that we can follow, and I think will be interesting to see, is that as they include climate change into the policy mix for the countywide planning policies, the understanding was in the presentation that Mike Hubner made to Suburban Cities is that we really wouldn't have to change the land use plan for the county. My sense as a land use planner is that, in fact, if you're going to really try to be serious about the directives that we have to try to reduce travel distances and automobiles from the state, and you start to look at global warming or climate change, that in fact there's a lot of room in our county land use plan for changes that would help focus growth around transit and light rail and where that's available. So I'm not personally, I asked that there be some explanation of why they felt the land use plan didn't have to change. I can understand Suburban Cities, Black Diamond and Enumclaw and places like that not wanting to face the fact that it's going to be more expensive in gasoline to travel to Seattle in the future, and that perhaps we would be better off with that growth allocation coming closer into the core of the urban area. But that's certainly something that they're proposing, to have policies to that effect, and yet not having it actually address the land use plan. So I'm not sure Suburban Cities is going to want to address that, but it's certainly a component of countywide planning policy that we can consider as we lobby for transit and as we look at plans for light rail and other mass transportation kinds of options here in King County. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mark. Nancy?
I've got a couple of things. One, I wanted to address some of the thoughts I had as a result of the public comments at the beginning of our meeting tonight. I do think our city, some of our residents are suffering very difficult times. Certainly the city revenues are down, that reflects some of those hardships. I think it's the time for the next several years that we need to look at tightening our belts and being fiscally conservative. The second part of my thought there was the 10th birthday celebration of our city. You know, I mean, is this a year to put on a big show? Should we have combined it with the July 4th celebration? Are we being as fiscally conservative and careful as we should be with our dollars? Anyway, that's one of the thoughts, and it's just in this particular context. I think we need to keep self-examining ourselves with everything that isn't really critical for the here and now, taking a look at the financial implications. I guess the second thing I had to do was on green cities, sustainable urban centers. The seminar was, or the conference, I guess, was extremely interesting. It had different sections you could go to, discussed all sorts of interesting issues and the financial, some of the different factors to consider. When it comes to Sammamish, we'll be addressing sustainability, I guess, shortly in our meeting. Some of them are philosophical issues. How much time do we want to spend on sustainability concerns? How much time and money, and when should that occur? You can plan from the top down, or you can plan from the bottom up and do a very extended process involving the public, sort of like what we did with the Ebright Creek, where the process was defined. It's supposed to be a guiding light in our city. And so really there's a question for the council. I mean, how important is sustainability to our city? Is it something we should be addressing in depth, getting our community buy-in? At this time, should we spend a lot of time and money on it? The things that were recommended at the conference from one extreme were to go through a very extensive process that would take tremendous time in city funds and staff time, or something that could be much more abbreviated, set out some general goals and principles, and go forward from there. So that's kind of a question that I think will be coming up from having attended this conference in our discussion shortly.
Okay, thank you. Kathy.
Yes, last week I went to the Regional Transit Committee, and probably an hour or two before the meeting, Metro presented us with their different scenarios in terms of how they might reduce bus service. And they were really three different scenarios they asked us to look at. One was, should we focus on having bus service during the congestion hours? You know, the morning hours, the morning rush hour, the evening rush hour, and cutting out midday and weekend service. That particular scenario is a high-cost scenario because you'd have a lot of buses on the road at the same time, a lot of drivers on the road at the same time. The other scenario they asked us to look at was, do we respond to people who are dependent upon transit? So in other words, those people who may work different shifts other than during the congestion period of time. People who live in areas they don't have automobiles and they depend on the bus as their only source of transportation. So that you would have buses running throughout the day. This would be a less costly service because you would have buses going throughout the day, fewer on the street at the same point in time. Or the last alternative was, do you focus on the high demand corridors where you know that you're going to have full buses whenever you send them out, rather than sending them out to areas where you might have, like during the day, maybe 15 or 20 people on the bus. This is probably the most efficient. So we're going from efficiency to equity and to social justice. They've kind of mixed the three scenarios together. And they brought a lot of other criteria in that, and they asked us to comment on it. what was most interesting was to look at the diagram of how much service, what the amount of ridership was under each of these scenarios, and how many people would be left out and not available, would not have bus service available under each of those scenarios. But given the short opportunity to really look at and to digest these, and frankly, it wasn't until we got the color-coded pages that it really began to make sense in a way that it didn't in black and white, because you didn't see the comparisons in quite the same way. We got to about 10 after 5, and Kevin asked us which we would recommend, and we, rather than making any recommendation, we asked him for further information that we would need to be able to carry a good discussion on next month. And part of that is, are we going to raise fares? How much money will be reduced by reducing non-core transit staff? We don't have a lot of those ideas in place at this point in time. So the discussion is ongoing, and it has been very robust, and I think rather informative. So we'll keep you apprised of where we're going.
Thank you. He didn't give you any numbers, like what percentage or how many service hours would be reduced in different scenarios?
Well, what he talked about is that the scenarios that he presented, that they were based on an 800,000 hour cut. However, it could be scaled down or up based on, there was a scalability factor. So we weren't to focus on that as much as the fact that there were very different outcomes under these scenarios.
That's a huge cut in service.
Huge. Well, it might be more than that.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. The mayor's report, I did also attend the Green Cities Conference down in Portland, and Portland is considered the #1 green city in the nation. And indeed, they do have a lot of pedestrian and a lot of bicycle commuters, and simply people going places. In fact, I found out that it's nice to walk from the convention center over the bridge of the river downtown, because when I wanted to take the light rail out to Hillsborough, it was down. The light rail had derailed yesterday, and so I sat there waiting for the train that didn't go. And I have to admit, I did walk across the bridge downtown, and I found the derailed light rail, and then I had a smile on my face. And as I took a picture of it saying not in service, which I'll have to pass on to the Sound Transit Board. But I did, the day before I took the light rail out to Gresham, and I was impressed with the usage, good ridership. I was surprised how slow it went in the downtown area, but once it got out into the suburbs, it went faster. It's totally in the ground, interacting with traffic and with pedestrians. And so downtown, where the one was derailed, I talked with the transportation traffic cop that was there and asked him about their accident records. And he said, oh, yes, we have accidents, and people get killed. Pedestrians get hit by it, which surprised me because they aren't going very fast. But then again, sometimes you don't expect a train to come along on the street. So it was actually very interesting, and they do have good service and a lot of bicyclists, and they've got some really nice trails along the river now. They actually took out a freeway, wasn't it, or at least a highway along the river, and replaced it with a river walk and some developments. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very impressive city, and this was, Kathy?
No, go ahead when you finish.
Okay, I was going to comment also, I went on a solar energy tour down there. We toured some facilities that had rooftop solar photovoltaic collectors on them, and they had two different kinds. One was the rather thick enclosure panels, and then they had one with actually flexible photovoltaic panels, and they can just actually bring it out and unroll it, rolls of this, and it's a cheaper process, and the improvements in the technology is just very impressive. I know back in the 1970s when I was first checking into solar photovoltaic, it was way too expensive. Now it's not competitive yet with wind energy and more traditional energy sources, but it's getting there. And when it does get competitive is when you have tax credits, federal tax credits, and in the state of Oregon, they have state tax credits that can pay for 50 to 80% of your capital costs of putting the installation in. And they have some creative financing and bringing in third parties to get the tax credits, of course, because the city doesn't get to use those. So that was very fascinating, and I'm looking forward to more advancements in solar. Regarding the light rail, you talked about the green roads back on the turn of last century. I was just curious, when were light rails first put into use? Was that in like the 1890s or something like that?
That's right. A good idea.
Long before then, though, in some places.
And everybody wanted a car.
Now, one other thing I learned about the solar is that they have a program down in Berkeley, which is one of the solar cities on a 25-city pilot program, where Berkeley has changed their code to set up a loan program for solar installations on residential homes. And so the city sets up, they put loans to the individual residents so that they put the installation in, and then the payback comes on your property tax bill. So you don't have a separate payment to make. It's just added to your bill. And it also qualifies for the Department of Energy block grant program. So it's something we might look into as a possibility up here. The interesting thing, I thought, well, solar isn't very good up here, but it turns out that actually we have better solar climate than in Germany, and Germany is the leading country in the world in terms of solar energy installations. So actually you do get enough solar energy in the Northwest to make it worthwhile, although admittedly it's hard to compete with our electrical rates from hydropower at this point. So that's the extent of my report. Mr. City, now Kathy, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were going to talk about sustainability. So what I wanted to comment on is what I found that looking at examples from around the country, and people have been doing this for a long time, they're beginning to put it into a contextual relationship. So for example, while we may be focusing on a green building and making sure that we have a building that's LEED certified, the folks that really created LEED are looking at how does that fit in context. So if we have an 8-story platinum LEED building that is sitting in a 10-acre parking lot, we have a problem because we don't have a LEED facility. We've got the building, but the fact that you're sitting there with a parking lot instead of looking at how do you make the whole project sustainable. In other words, is there bus service to the project? Is there a way to walk to the project? How have you designed the whole project? Have you done stormwater recovery on that project? And so it's this broader contextual relationship that I think those that have been doing it for a while are now beginning to look at, and how do we create sustainable neighborhoods and sustainable communities rather than building or changing light bulbs. So I found that very interesting that as it's maturing, it's kind of moving along in the process. And I think there were some really exciting projects that we heard about that I hope we have an opportunity to talk about, where neighborhoods are working on various and sundry projects. But all in all, I'm really grateful to having been sent to the conference, because there was a great deal to learn about all stages of energy, sustainability, and looking at sustainability from a variety of different components. And I think we're all back and excited about bringing that to the table. And no, we didn't bring you any projects. We made sure that we didn't don't have a list.
Just wait.
Although I do have a book for you.
Thank you, Kathy. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got to tell you that I appreciate the council's dedication going to these conferences. It's really, I know you put your weekends into this thing. I have to also share that with you. When I told the various council members that 4 of you were at the conference, the immediate response was, "Oh no." And they said, well, they come back with this bunch of work items for us to do it.
Our staff wouldn't say that, would they?
So the 99.9% said that's the response. There's one positive saying, well, that's a great idea. So they're trying to identify who that one person is. Anyway, despite kidding and joking, thank you for going to the conference. And it's so timely that we have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission tonight that we'll be talking about sustainability. I have designated actually Cameron, our lead person at the City Hall to deal with this issue. He's also our lead coordinator with the sister cities, and for that matter, actually, King County and Representative Jay Inslee was also involved, and the mayor was involved in that one as well. So we'll have a detailed report coming up on that one. Mr. Mayor, the only report that I have is that I'll be taking a few days off visiting my mother, and I'll be leaving rest of the week and the following week. And Pete Butkus, Deputy City Manager, will be the acting city manager while I'm gone. And I will ask for council's permission to leave after the regular council meeting so I can get my suitcase ready.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, there's no executive session this evening. So with that, we're going to adjourn the regular meeting, and then we'll take a break now and set up for a joint study session with the Planning Commission.